I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi, and welcome. It's February 11th, 8:30 early evening in Israel. I'm not in Israel. I'm in Florida at the moment on a lecture tour in the U.S. And lots going on this week in Israel, around Israel, in the Middle East, not the least of which the Hamas announcement that it's going to stop releasing hostages. And I'm planning on dealing with that in the next couple of days as it becomes clearer what's going on. Certainly a crisis on the level of the agreement. We'll see if that's a good thing or a bad thing in the long run. But what I want to deal with today is the Trump relocation plan for the residents of Gaza and the possibilities and probabilities of what's going on with that. So let's break it down. Let's look at what I'll say, the good, the bad, and the possible and the impossible. Starting with the idea that President Trump comes up with this concept that Gaza is uninhabitable, which is true. It is a long-term problem area. I'll say going back to 3,000 years ago when Samson pulled the temple down on himself and the Gaza of the Philistines. And a solution is to move this population out for its own good and for the good of everybody else. That's the grand background to the plan. And then rebuild it, and depending on how you look at Trump's motives, maybe build a hotel there on the beach and live happily ever after. There are positive aspects to the plan, starting with the fact that Gaza is, in fact, uninhabitable. It needs to be rebuilt one way or the other. The population there, as we've been learning, some of us knew well before, is not exactly an uninvolved, innocent population on the whole. There are certainly uninvolved innocents in there. But as more and more of the hostages have been released, they've come out to say they didn't see any innocence. They were held in private homes. They were passed between private families, not just Hamas terrorists in their tunnels. Children that they spoke to, ages 5, 6, 7, talk about murdering Jews. It's kind of hard to argue that these are innocent civilians who are being controlled by Hamas. Even if you take it from a step back from there, there have been many plans for Gaza, including the Camp David Accords, which saw the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Palestinian populated areas in the 1990s, through the disengagement of 2005, withdrawing Israeli forces and civilian population from what was left, that had been not given back or withdrawn from in the 90s, Gush Katif and the other villages of Gaza, 2005, some 8,000 Israeli civilians, plus thousands of troops withdrawn from there, in the hope that this would give the Palestinians the possibility to set up something on this beachfront property, and leaving behind greenhouses and other infrastructure, all of which was destroyed. And of course, shortly after that, Hamas came into power, and the rest is history. So, thinking out of the box, shaking it up, threatening or planning the removal of the population and then a wait and see, although the most recent statement made by President Trump is that those who were removed would not be permitted to return. Whether practical or not, and I'll come to that in a moment, this is a paradigm shift that also sends a message to the Palestinian leadership, terrorist and otherwise, that time is not on your side. And they've been operating for decades on the theory that time is on their side, so they can turn down any offer because the next offer has got to be better. And now they're suddenly faced with the reality of a plan that's not better for them. And that in and of itself is a good thing. Whether it'll have grand implications or not, once again, remains to be seen. However, there are a number of obstacles that need to be overcome, some of which are larger than others. And they start with I would say, the weakest part of the concept, the relocation, which views the entire Gaza situation as essentially a housing and real estate issue. And, relocation, we're going to take the population, give them new real estate. Better. What could they possibly want? The flaw in the concept is the same flaw that led us to October 7th, and that is discounting ideology, and in this case, jihadi, radical Islamic ideology, which is far more important to many of the people of Gaza, and certainly to all the members of Hamas, than the simple economic rationality of live a better life, be under better circumstances, maybe earn a little bit more money, maybe get a more humanitarian aid, more imported aid, better work permits, and so on and so forth, which was the Israeli theory that brought us to October 7th, failed theory. By the same token, looking at this purely in real estate terms, and who wouldn't want a cheap or free home in replacement for the utterly destroyed rubble of your old home? As I said, discounts the ideology that fits in and says, I'll take the rubble. I'm not moving from here. Another pitfall is, of course, where are they going to go? And the two most obviously touted locations are Jordan and Egypt, with President Trump threatening both of those countries with withdrawal of aid if they don't come to heel. In both cases, we have a problem. Jordan has a problem because it's already an unstable monarchy. The majority of the population, depending on whose numbers you believe, are 70 to 80% Palestinian. The ruling family and its supporters are 20-something% Bedouin. Bedouin and Palestinians often do not get along, and they don't get along in Jordan. There have already been mini uprisings and not so many uprisings. The largest uprising potential that was put down under the father of the current king, under King Hussein, in September 1970 against the Palestinians refer to as Black September. And depending on whose numbers you believe, somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 Palestinians were killed by the Jordanian army in 3 weeks of September 1970. Think about that for a moment when you consider the casualty rates in Gaza over the past year and change. The population of Jordan is not that large. Bringing 1 million Palestinians in is likely to destabilize the country, and not in a good way. And under those circumstances, King Abdullah is likely to dig in his heels, and he might prefer the status quo with his population to the need for American aid. And survival is really important. He doesn't want to find himself in the same situation as Bashar Assad found himself a couple of months ago, having to flee the country because of an uprising. Egypt is a slightly different issue. Egypt gets a huge amount of aid from the United States, and it's a big country. It could absorb 1 million or 2 million people and even hide them somewhere, like in Sinai or the Western Desert, although Hamas, being a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, and President Assisi of Egypt having come to power after overthrowing a Muslim Brotherhood government, may not really want to import more trouble for himself. But on a grander level, the American aid, large as it is conditional from the American side, but also from the Egyptian side. First of all, it's tied into the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty, which is a tremendous asset to Israel, tremendous asset to the United States, tremendous asset to the Middle East from stability point of view. The Egyptians are saying, if you cut off the aid, you've basically taken away all of our incentive to maintain the peace treaty. Is it brinksmanship? Is it just a threat? Hard to say, but American aid is certainly a component of maintaining the peace treaty. Threatening to remove it has elicited the obvious threat by the Egyptians: no aid, no treaty. And this would be rather problematic. Another factor that we have to keep in mind is that the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty and the aid that goes to Egypt with it, that dates back to the 1970s, was part of a major diplomatic coup on the part of the United States, taking Egypt out of the sphere of Soviet influence, Soviet at the time, and into the sphere of American influence. As a matter of fact, Egypt was the only major country during the Cold War to voluntarily change sides and go from the Soviet to the American orbit. A tremendous diplomatic coup, manufactured and engineered largely by Henry Kissinger, and then followed up afterwards. Under the Obama administration, when the administration was putting pressure on Egypt, the Russians very, very quickly stepped in and said, hey, the Americans cut you off. We're here. You can always come over to our side. And it didn't actually happen, but it was on the verge of undoing that great diplomatic advantage of the 1970s. It could happen again. In other words, as far as Egypt is concerned, America is not the only game in town. The Russians are a game. Are they as attractive today as they were in the 1970s? Perhaps. But if push comes to shove, keeping national honor in mind as well, Assisi is possibly able to say to President Trump, take your aid, stick it where the sun don't shine, I'm going to Moscow. And that's another very important consideration that would be horrible for the American strategic position in the Eastern Mediterranean. But the real pitfall of this program is in Hamas and the population of Gaza. Now, there's an element of nonsense. The population of Gaza is claimed to be 80% refugee, and at the same time saying, we will not leave our land. Well, if you're a refugee, you're not on your land, and if you're on your land, you're not a refugee. Make up your mind. But nonetheless, the Palestinians have been living multiple logical existences for many, many years. There's no reason that's going to change anytime soon. And that brings us to the question, even if Egypt agrees, and even if the whole grand organizational mechanism can be worked out, how do you get nearly 2 million people to move? First of all, if they're not willing to, physically remove them, drag them out of the rubble and out of the tents and throw them on trucks and drive them out? I don't see that happening. And the question is, who's going to do that? Israeli troops? I don't think so. American troops? I'm certain not. Then who? And if there's a significant number that can be cajoled, bought off, paid off, what are you going to do when Hamas says, anybody who leaves, we're going to shoot? Because for Hamas, this plan is an utter disaster. This guarantees the end of Hamas in Gaza. It guarantees the end of Hamas rule. And that's what this whole business is all about right now. Hamas has been very badly damaged militarily. It has not been very badly damaged in terms of its brutality and its capability to inflict brutality on the Palestinian population. And I don't see that disappearing anytime soon. Even if the ceasefire breaks down, and even if we go back into Gaza Next week, we will cause further damage to its military capability, as we've done already. They will recruit new members who are even less capable than the new members they've recruited over the past few months. But their ability to take out Palestinian civilians and shoot them is not going to be diminished. Their ability to threaten the families of those who do manage to escape will not be diminished. And the question is, how many people are going to be willing to brave that threat in order to leave under the circumstances? In my opinion, not that many. So the weakness of the plan ultimately is not in its structure, it's not in its concept, it's in its practical application of getting the people themselves to move. And time will tell, but I think we're looking at a fantasy that could solve many problems, but the people on the ground are not willing to be the ones who are going to solve it. So we'll see. We'll see over the next weeks whether President Trump can make them an offer they can't refuse, and we'll check back in on the subject if there are any great developments. Next up in the next couple of days, I'm going to deal with the Hamas threat, and we'll see where it's going and how far it's gone. In the meantime, stay engaged, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.